All right, we'll call the meeting to order, the July 27th meeting of the Data Center Advisory Committee. Start with a roll call for the minutes.
Your microphone's up, by the way.
Call the meeting to order. July 27th, meeting of the Data Center Advisory Committee. We'll start with our roll call for this evening for the record. So, Maria's not here. I'll call the roll. Michael Long here. Renee Oldham absent. Mary Zurbach.
Here.
Derek Adams.
Here.
Philip Hayes. He's absent. That's what I thought. Okay. Samuel Gallion.
Here.
Kylie Blaylock.
Here.
Melissa Jackson.
Here.
Paul Overhauser.
Here.
Julie Saddam.
Here.
Clark Smith.
Here.
Janine Gray.
Here.
And Lacey Willard.
Here.
Okay, also present is Kayla Brooks. Maria Enriquez is going to be in here in a minute. And Rhonda Cook, attorney for the Planning Commission. All right, I'd like to advise you to please turn off any cell phones, electronic devices this evening. All testimony that we would take, well, we're not taking any testimony this evening, but it'd be taken under oath. We won't be taking any of that, none of this. Okay, this meeting is being recorded and streamed for public viewing, and by participating this evening, you acknowledge that your image, voice, and comments may be captured and made publicly available. Our meeting this evening has been properly noticed in accordance with Indiana Code 514.1.5. Has Kayla resurfaced? She has not. Okay. So a quick recap for what we're doing this evening. Originally, we had scheduled the last meeting, we scheduled our next meeting to be on August 18th. And we've inserted this meeting this evening. So we do need a motion to accept the meeting minutes from last meeting that were submitted electronically.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign, motion carries. Okay, so just a quick recap again. This committee was formed to study and inform the Plan Commission with any recommendations to siting of data centers in our county. Prior to that first meeting, the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners adopted an overlay ordinance, which would help give us some direction on these recommendations that we were going to be making, which would be kind of some redlining of that ordinance regarding development guidelines, zoning district ideas, and enhancing that overlay. While that was still a little bit overwhelming, and on how much work we really needed to be doing and detailing, we decided to I guess from there, we had an awful lot of discussion and we had speakers and all that. So we decided to appoint a scribe committee to summarize our meetings to date. That would be a summary of all of the discussions, the speakers, et cetera, and essentially what we have learned. And that's what I think Kayla is printing right now and bringing that out because that was prepared by that committee. So then about that time, our county leadership felt that they needed some input sooner from the Planning Commission. And so we asked the scribe committee to also consider how that summary could be formatted as sort of an important topics list that this committee could use as sort of our first level, or it could be the recommendation or our first level of recommendation. And so that is this other document that is called Data Center Questions. So they did that. We'll be perusing that, we'll be presenting that, and we'll be discussing that this evening. Before all of that happened, we were kind of talking about how this whole timing and the progress was going to work from this point going forward, as we are kind of consistently from meeting to meeting figuring out where we're going and what we're doing here. And so Rhonda has created a kind of a preliminary schedule, which she can present to us this evening on how our committee fits into this overall schedule of what the Planning Commission needs to do and then what the Board of Commissioners will be faced with our overlay ordinance. So again, this committee is making notes, suggestions, and recommendations for an ordinance. And this is, the ordinance work will be done by the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners. The ordinance work's not done by this committee. This committee is just making recommendations and bringing citizens' thoughts and opinions towards that. Any additional influence that we would like to have beyond what we're doing here this evening with recommendations and questions and just trying to learn and forward our information on would need to be done in the normal course of talking directly with your elected officials and commenting in public meetings and all of the normal hearing items. So with that, what I'd like to do this evening is we'll have Rhonda talk about how that schedule might work, and then our scribe committee, which was Lacey, Derek, and Paul, Renee's not here, will kind of walk us through their summary that they did, and then the data center questions summary, which is nothing new. That's just questions that they pulled from our meeting minutes and discussions that we've had and things that our speakers have talked about. So with that, Rhonda, do you have that list of that schedule to talk about?
I have it in print form too. I don't know if you want to pass it around or not, but so tonight, July 27th, Citizens Committee meets to discuss questions prepared by the scribes. Draft recommendation is prepared based on that discussion. So I'm going to be doing my best as you have this discussion with the questions to try to start getting that into format for a formal recommendation. Tomorrow night, the Plan Commission meets at their regular meeting. The Planning Director provides a status update of the work done by this committee, the Citizens Committee, and shares a summary of the July 27th Citizens Committee discussion, and if it is ready in some type of form, the draft of the committee recommendation. On August 18th, Citizens Committee has another meeting to take public comment, also reviewing the draft recommendation, which should have been circulated by that time, and make any final adjustments to the recommendation, either that you want or that it's based on comments that you hear by the public, and adopt the final recommendation to send to the Plan Commission. At the August 25th, 2026 Plan Commission meeting, the Plan Commission will consider your final recommendation, have discussion, and direct staff and attorney to prepare an ordinance to amend the Hancock County Code, and then to advertise for a public hearing on that ordinance at the following Plan Commission meeting, which will be on September 22nd. September 9th would be the deadline when that draft ordinance would be out there for the public to review, and we would advertise notice of public hearing by that date and make the draft ordinance available. So on September 22nd, Plan Commission holds the public hearing on the draft ordinance, and at that time they can take action to make a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. The recommendation then, the following day, September 23rd, 2026, would be certified and delivered to the Board of Commissioners. And then the commissioners could take up that ordinance either at their next regular meeting, which is September 29th. That happens to be a joint meeting of the council or commissioners, or they could take up the ordinance at one of their other meetings or hold a special meeting. So that's kind of the steps outlined to get this committee all the way through its process.
Yeah. So I think when we started this process with this committee, I think what our hope was to generate lists of topics and concerns that would be important to be considered in the ordinance, but also to start talking in depth about development guidelines. And hopefully we can still do that at some point. But I think that the county leadership is anxious to get some information fed to them. So I don't know that this recommendation that we would be putting together will be the end of this work. But it's a piece of it that we can start feeding some things to them so they can be better prepared in any conversations that might come up immediately here in the future. So I think that this evening's purpose really is to discuss, like Rhonda said, this document compiled executive summaries of the committee materials, and then these data center questions that might be some guidance for the Plan Commission and the Board of Commissioners as they're talking about projects like this. So a lot to read here, so I think we'll ask Lacey and Derek and Paul. I don't know who wants to go first, but just sort of kind of walk us through the summary of the summary, I guess.
I think it was going first.
Yeah, I was just going to go over, we kind of developed some assumptions to operate under as we went through the scribe committee here. First and foremost, we were only scribing the documents that were made publicly available through the website. So we're not generating anything new, we're not adding our own, we're not compiling anything from any other source. It's just things that have been presented in this meeting and that are publicly available through the website on Hancock IN, not any other website. We're assuming that the scribing will take place after every meeting, so as additional information is brought forward, discussed, what have you, the scribing will continue so that we can continue to take our executive summaries, they're a living document, we add to them so that there's just one cohesive document for all of the things that we go through, so you don't have to go to every single thing. We kind of split up the work. That was another thing that we did, rather than everybody working on everything and then coming back together and checking notes. We just kind of divvied things up. So, for example, Lacey would take the lead on one thing, and then she would bring that back to the group for all of us to consider for quality assessment, to ask any questions, to go over anything and amend anything as necessary. And in doing that, we did not put anything in the document that there was not a consensus of the scribe committee on. So everyone, or at least 3 of the 4, had to agree that what was being put into the document was accurate, and that's what we wanted to put in the document to make sure that the quality of what was going in there was being controlled properly.
So we generated some executive summaries of all the content on the site. We did decide that we should have a character or a count limit in doing that. Otherwise, it was just going to be regurgitation. So it was, we put caps on it. And we do think this is going to be a living document. For example, anything presented or posted to the site after this meeting, we would probably want to incorporate into version 2 of this document after this meeting. And we did not all, there's several videos that are linked. We didn't, as scribes, sit and watch them. We did use the transcripts that are located within there, but we didn't have like live sessions reviewing them again, since a lot of us participated or had viewed those. I think that is about all of the notes on the executive summary for now. Again, this will be a living document extending as we go. And Paul did the questions for us.
Yeah, I put together the list of questions, and this is the document they have before you is, I don't know, 3rd or 4th iteration of them. I put it together by starting by looking at data center ordinances that had been provided by Kayla. She provided the ones from Loudoun County, Virginia, the one from Iowa, who we had a speaker for, the one from Wisconsin. I think that all of those are probably, maybe you could characterize them as pro-data center, or all have big data centers going in there. We did not look at any ordinances that provided for moratoriums. That seem to be outside of our scope for now, but who knows, maybe the committee will come back to that later. We listened to all the presentations, especially the one that I felt was helpful was the one from the professor from Purdue. And it'll probably come as no surprise that some of the main issues in the data center questions concern those that had been repeatedly raised during the previous presentations, specifically the issues of data center electric usage, water usage, and the use of non-disclosure agreements and making sure any process is transparent. Another issue that we touched on briefly was, what do we do if a data center wants to come in to the county and for whatever reason they get approved but they don't build their building, or it's not completed, or what happens to it then? How do we go through decommissioning? So those are the issues that we went through. Perhaps this document could provide some guidance to those who are more experts than certainly me, or perhaps others on the scribe committee, at drafting a zoning ordinance. So if we'd like to move to, Mike, did you want to go through and look at the data center questions document, or?
Yeah, I know a lot of you are seeing this kind of for the first time, but if you read through it, what you'll notice is that none of this is really new to you. These are all questions that came out of our discussions, essentially, just on paper and clearly and concisely. So I think what we have here are 2 documents that could could begin to form maybe not a recommendation, but a transfer of some information to the Planning Commission so that they could, and the Board of Commissioners, so that they could start to see what, in a concise document, what is being produced here, and as a planning tool at this point. So I don't know if this evening, if we want to, we could do a lot of different things, and we could start to try to put together some sort of a recommendation to the Planning Commission as to what should show up in that overlay ordinance. If some of these questions need to be part of that findings section of the ordinance, or if we want to recommend that this document be adopted as a reference document by the Planning Commission as they review overlay ordinances. Those are some of the discussion items, I guess, that we could discuss how we want to do that. But essentially what we'd like to leave here this evening was something being passed to the Planning Commission, whether it's just these documents or this document truncated in some way, or if you want to start addressing do you have the ordinance, the overlay ordinance you could put up with that findings section on it? If we want to start talking about that section specifically and how we wanted to maybe fold some of this stuff into that as a recommendation.
It's at the top of Paul's questions, the following criteria.
Oh, okay, so at the
Yep.
very, that's the same thing there, yeah, okay. So, so this document, if you look at it, I guess it does kind of help lead. So if a project were to come to the Plan Commission with the overlay and they needed to, pass a recommendation off to the Board of Commissioners, they could look at this document, and then these are the questions that this committee has found that are important for them to consider that need to be in a proposal from a developer for a data center type project. So I actually was quite pleased with the output here of what we have, and I think this would be a good tool for the Planning Commission to use in evaluation of anything that were to happen in the near future, as this committee continues to do research and learn more about these types of projects.
Can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. What AI tool is being used, or who is using an AI tool today? Anyone? An AI tool to put together any of the documents here? Anybody using anything AI? ChatGPT?
As
a summary tool?
In my practice as an attorney, I have for several years used AI mainly to proofread my briefs and submissions for court because I'm a proofreader.
Okay.
But
I was just curious about that. Next question was, what data center type could be coming to us now that we would have no capability of examining and or stopping that from happening? Am I understanding correctly that today we have zoning in place that would allow a data center, and maybe one's already in the process of trying to have conversations? Could you explain to me what that would look like, or what type that would be, and where that might be coming?
I don't think with the overlay in place now, I think that any data center, defined as a data center, correct, it would have to be an overlay. So it would have to go through that whole process of the Plan Commission, the Board of Commissioners to get an overlay approved to happen, and it's only in the IG districts.
that would include a public hearing component?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Two.
it can
That
come
was
in
already
as a
passed,
PUD,
wasn't it?
though. It can still come in as a PUD.
No, it still has to
Planned
go
unit development, is that, I thought if they
Yeah.
come and submit a planned unit development,
Yeah.
that doesn't
Let me
apply.
pull up the ordinance again,
Yeah.
what was passed, so just give me 1 second, and I'll read the steps, because, so, let's just start here. If the ordinance initially changed the zoning districts where a data center could be located without a zoning change, so it can be in the industrial general location now with, subject to the overlay. That ordinance removed all those other zoning districts from that same treatment, where if they complied with the zoning for those districts, that it would, and they didn't want anything like a variance, or it would never have to go to a hearing, that was changed in that ordinance. So PUD is a zoning change in itself. And that's subject to a public hearing. That's more scrutiny if you go that route. So there's a hearing process involved with this. So let me pull up that ordinance and just kind of explain to you like that process now. If a data center would want to come in to the IG zoning district, that's the only zone that it's permitted in. If they wanted to go somewhere that was not zoned, they would have to apply for a rezone. And that's a whole process and a hearing change, and there's, steps to go through in order for that to happen. But let me pull up that ordinance, 1 second.
While she's looking at that, I think in a nutshell, I think the simple answer is that a data center project that would come now would have public hearings. It
Right.
would have to go to the Planning Commission, it'd have to go to the Board of Commissioners. So the elected officials would have a final say in the approval of a project.
Prior to that ordinance,
Yeah.
if they went somewhere that was already zoned for data center, the commission had no input.
Thank you for clarifying. I've been hearing different feedback from different venues and forums that suggested that might not be the case. So I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, there is a lot of nonsense going on social media right now.
I'm trying to avoid it as much as I can, but it's hard because we also have our group that helps or attempts to help channel conversation correctly. So
Well, I think that was a lot of the reason to form this task force as well, so that, we could have some legitimate information posed to us instead of everyone getting their information off of TikTok and Facebook and X and all that other stuff. So there's really, with the doctor from Purdue that spoke last month, he did a fantastic job.
I do want to share one thing. I've been involved in artificial intelligence and knowledge-based systems for many years. Systems being what they are programmed by people. So I'm just cautioning you to say, when you do use an AI tool, take a minute to look at it and make sure it's not making you bias. It's not generating bias, because the AI tools are developed by the people that want to use data centers. So I'm just suggesting that you need to be a little careful about that and kind of like give it the old human once-over to make sure it's not leaning a certain direction in summarizing what you've asked it to summarize or what you're pointing it to compile, if that makes sense.
So to go through the ordinance that was passed, there was a change made to the definition of communication service exchange, which was really a definition for like a telephone switching station, and then it also included data centers, and we separated those two definitions and created a standalone data center definition that says a facility used primarily for the storage, management, processing, and transmission of digital data, and that houses computer or network equipment, systems, servers, appliances, and other associated components related to digital data storage, processing, and related operations. Data center uses include data storage facilities, server farms, artificial intelligence training or processing, image processing, cloud computing, email servicing, and similar uses. So then we changed that this definition would apply only to the IG, where a data center could go, subject to the overlay. And then we really put in a process for that overlay, but the overlay needed more input from this committee and to be kind of filled in with further requirements, but the general process was set up in this ordinance, which says that the overlay district is an additional layer of requirements to the existing requirements in the IG zoning district. All data center projects that are subject to this section are considered for siting within the county's planning and zoning jurisdiction, must meet the requirements of this section to the satisfaction and as approved by the Board of Commissioners. So there the commissioners have a role to play where maybe they wouldn't have before. You start out with an approval process where someone that wants to propose a data center issues a letter of intent when they're ready to do so, and then the Board of Commissioners can ask for further information with that request. And then, as I explained before, probably at the first meeting, there's going to be a lot of back and forth between the company and the commissioners to kind of figure out what information they need from them. When they feel like they're ready to go forward, they adopt a declaratory resolution by the Board of Commissioners that says that the data center project substantially meets the criteria in B3, and that's the criteria that Paul has at the top of his questions. And then the criteria is listed. Then the pre-application review process starts with the planning director, and then the planning director has to make a determination if there's a complete application. And then there's a project review at the technical review committee, and any variances that are necessary go through the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then a public hearing after tech committee by the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission shall certify to the Board of Commissioners that a public hearing was held, and the certification can also include any suggestions or recommendations in regard to the project. Then the Board of Commissioners adopts a confirmatory resolution once they're happy with all of that, or they could send the project back to tech review if they get comments that need further adjustments are needed. Once all those concerns have been addressed, then the confirmatory resolution is adopted by the Board of Commissioners, and they may require written commitments by the data center company. And then they proceed on with the improvement location permit in that process. So it really does put in quite a few steps where the commissioners have more say in there and can have some more back and forth.
Thank you.
Yeah, but during that process, I think where the commissioners are probably coming from, and Janine can correct me if I'm not assuming correctly, but I think that they just felt like they needed some tools and they needed something to look at if something were to come to them. And Kayla's office as well. There's in the overlay ordinance, there's the 6 items to consider. But what this does is it takes what we've discussed here and elaborated on that quite a bit. So to me, this list of questions with the backup of the summaries here is a pretty solid document for a planning tool, I guess I would call it, to forward to the Planning Commission to then maybe make a recommendation on that to the commissioners. So if you'd like, we could go through this this evening, item by item, and discuss it and make sure that everybody's comfortable with it. Item number 1 would be, it's the development review framework, basically selecting the right planning tool. So I think that this is something that Kayla would use, I think, or her staff would use as to whether or not, I think what we're talking about here is whether or not we want to use the overlay district or if we want to possibly use a PUD. And then it talks about development agreements and PUD plus development agreements and all those types of things here.
Would we just look at a PUD? Oh, I'm sorry. Would we just look at using the PUD if the PUD was only for the site that data center, if you will, would go on? Or if they come and they buy 500 acres and are only going to use 200 acres, is that whole thing going to go under a PUD?
Yeah, I think that's where each project's going to be different, and that was where the struggle was. Is every one of these projects, it's going to be hard to really write guidelines and development standards for data centers because they're all has so many different tiers and levels and difficulties and things. And then, like you said, that they'll come and they'll say we want to use 200 acres, but we want to rezone 500 acres. So in that case, yeah, the PUD kind of makes some sense because that gives the county the ability to help plan that 500 acres. So if a project like that came, then I would think, yeah, the PUD is probably the right move because it's giving us the opportunity, just like the one that did come last year, that it gives you the opportunity to evaluate an entire area and plan in some buffers and some unique items. The thing with the PUDs is that you need to have a unique development in order, and that's why the Planning Commission, I think, oftentimes shies away from PUDs is because a lot of them that come don't integrate that unique planning component, right? Is that the right term, unique planning components? You want to talk PUD? Come talk PUD. We'll let the planner talk PUD. I'll sit back.
Since we're establishing this overlay district and writing some ordinance work that goes into it, along with all of the recommendations and discussion we've had here, I would suggest not using a PUD for a data center. At this point, this is the valuable work that needs to be put into an ordinance for that overlay district, and that is really what a PUD previously would have covered. So PUDs, from a planning perspective, are a nightmare.
But there are wonderful outlines on PUDs of all the different things that they address. So they do give, whatever we call it, doesn't have to be a PUD, it could be data center overlay or whatever we want to call it. But it does outline all the components that this group may, I mean, a lot of these questions talk about what those components are. But the PUD might give us a good outline of what this overlay, what the issues and the submission needs to look like if we do that, right?
Potentially as far as the submission goes, but our ordinance already shows how that submission needs to look with the letter of intent. That overlay district then can help to establish some of those development standards and things like that. So I think we've really got the framework we need in the overlay district itself. I would also point out that our ordinance has got, our zoning ordinance overall was drafted in the early 2000s, and at that time PUDs were in place pretty much specifically for residential subdivisions. So it wasn't really a guideline, I guess, for drafting a PUD that had to do with something industrial.
I totally agree with Kayla on this particular subject.
I mean, I was thinking just, you know, we don't want to diminish what we're doing here, but if you do put if you close one route, and I think every route should have a public hearing, no matter whatever route's available, each one should have a public hearing. So since the PUD does have a public hearing, I wouldn't want to completely close it just because I've experienced a completely different type of regulation, but when you do put something down one path, you run into a scenario that you never envisioned. And I ran into that recently with an operator in grain that the legislators never envisioned. I never envisioned we would have this situation, so I wouldn't want to cut off any route that had a public hearing.
This would not cut off. I mean, anybody can apply for a PUD for whatever they want. We also are, Mike, the Plan Commission, and the Board of Commissioners, Janine, are allowed to say that's not what our vision is for this community, things like that. I would also say what we should do, rather than go immediately to PUD, is adopt recommendations that are specifically getting at the types of data centers and the areas we foresee them going into. So while the ordinance we have in place today roughly sets out, here's what we define data center as, and we see it going in IG, industrial general, which is a heavy industrial district with a, sorry, Dusty, I'm talking to the microphone, with a data center overlay. There's nothing that says we can't get into that ordinance again and amend it so that actually it's got 4 subtypes of data centers, ranging from very small accessory type uses all the way up to your hyperscale AI, big scary one that we're, you know, kind of concerned about. So
That's your computer?
Siri, something I say.
Funny the AI talks back
Yeah.
to AI.
So we can define data center subtypes as we need to and say a smaller data center, and actually Kylie, you had developed a document that Maria and I went and ran with early on in this. So like an enterprise data center, I think, is what the smallest kind was defined as, oftentimes incorporated into like a government building or a hospital. That might be something to consider in commercial zoning districts or institutional zoning districts as accessory uses. Maybe it shouldn't go through all the same steps as a hyperscale data center that definitely needs to be in that IG zoning district. So we can get a lot more specific, and I think that might cut out some of the need for PUD as well.
But I thought we were trying to put something together here, and maybe I'm off track, that requires them to submit information so we have a better idea of what they're building, what utility usages will be, so that we have more control there.
But that's the overlay, correct?
That is the recommendation, I believe, that we're trying to establish right now. I'm saying that in that ordinance document, would probably need to define out what types of data centers there are and who all that level of analysis applies to.
So that's my concern. What you just mentioned was with the overlay right now, we don't really have a way to require, I guess the Plan Commission can always require a development plan. So to actually see what's being
But
developed.
what I'm saying is the PUD ordinance requires all the same information our development plan would be. So
Right.
these questions are great, but I think that we have a guidepost with the PUD. We're not going to call it that. But we can use some of those same requirements of information we'd like to gather in this overlay instead of recreating these categories all again.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. We can use it as a guidepost and see which ones. But I thought Purdue's, the gentleman that was here last time, gave us those categories of those data center sizes that you're alluding to. Okay. But you're saying that we have to define those in the zoning ordinance under each. Because what's an IT closet or an IDF room different in a building? I mean, we don't require a size of those rooms. They may be data centers. You know, I know one office building in Fishers that the entire 10,000 square foot is a data center, but they call it their IT room.
50% of the challenge of planning and zoning is in the definitions section.
I just don't know how we categorize. Do we square foot it? Is there a certain amount of BTUs that come out of it that we're concerned about? I mean, I don't know how you defining those sizes in your ordinance.
Lynn County, Iowa's ordinance had a start at it, so that would be one document to look at. Some of the other communities that have been going through this process have been defining different types of data centers. So we could certainly look to those examples.
So we did encounter the tiering definitions in some of the sub-documents when we did the summaries. And so it's like a tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's not based upon any one measure. It's, what is it? It's anticipated electrical demand, water demand, floor area, acreage, backup generation, and then there's an associate schedule. So it's not just one item, and that we did encounter exactly that, and that might be appropriate to adopt into an amendment. That might be a recommendation out of this committee to tier it. And then the development standards associated with each of those tiers would be a little bit different and considered differently with whatever route they come in. What would be a big miss is if we consider these questions only applicable to the overlay district with an IG. Like that would be a miss for us.
Not a what?
So it would be a miss if we say this only applies to the overlay district on an IG. Because if we tier it, this would allow for the minimum items in this to apply to anything that we would see as a data center project or campus. And be it a PUD or anything else. It might take a little bit of work with Rhonda to get that reach, but these questions would be asked at any of those tiers.
I'm not necessarily advocating for the PUD route, but if a project came as a PUD, then that application comes to your office, and if you don't understand it, you send it back, right? You just don't accept it as a submittal. I mean, we've had this before where it's like the projects come in, they kind of lightly check all the boxes. We think everything's there, so we move forward with it. But if there's information in here that says, we're building a campus of IT buildings, of technology buildings, and you don't understand what they are, then you can request additional information, like explain what each building is, almost like a development plan, define each use, and then we can start to compare it to the information that we've now kind of compiled here. It's like, what tier do we think this is? What is the impact of this building and that building, and how does that relate to the surrounding areas? And I guess where I'm going is that we can sit here and try and create all these definitions and all these guidelines, when in reality, we just really need a developer to tell us what they're wanting to build, and then we can see how that fits.
Certainly when I accept something in my office, and I know I've been learning, I'm learning, so I know first talk to Rhonda and make sure everything is definitely, all the boxes are properly checked. but I am required to still accept a bad idea or a project that's not great. It's you then who has to take that and say, oh, you know, Kayla, what are you doing? Why did you bring this to us? And say, well, this needs to actually go and try to be a data center overlay IG deal, or no, this is a terrible idea for our community. You have to make that decision, not me. I just make sure they've got all of their papers and their filing fee and their public notice. So, and then of course the staff recommendation eventually, but you guys are really the decision makers.
We can take a PUD and say that this needs to go in some other kind of development process, right? Like, just because they submitted a PUD doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a PUD or it should be a PUD.
It follows the process and that's in our Hancock County Code. It's 156.050. So a PUD is, if you want to build something in Hancock County and you're in a certain zone, you say, okay, I either need a rezone or I'm going to go into this zone. I'm going to look at what my standards are for that development zone. And that's what you follow, is what's in the code. In this case, what we just were talking about is we now have one more layer, overlay. If you want to have a PUD, you're going to write your own code right then and there. So we will not ever go back to the Hancock County Code to look at we'll look there for the process, but when we want to know the standards, we have to go to a separate document that was created for the code just for that project. Now, one of the things in the code for PUD, it requires a final detailed development plan. So to answer Janine's question, if they came and they had no idea what they were going to build, we couldn't move forward with the PUD. We have to have all the final details. We might be able to say, okay, you've got this 100-acre parcel and you know what you're going to build on 25 acres, but you don't know the rest. Then I would say we're going to rezone the 25 acres because you know what you're going to have there. And when you get ready and you know what the rest of it's going to be, then come back to us and we're going to do another PUD. Does that make sense?
Wouldn't the letter of intent clear a lot of this up? Hadn't we previously talked about that? They submit an LOI and then Kayla would see it and be able to say, this actually is going to fit into an overlay district. Would you send it back to them if they said, I want to do a PUD and then it actually fit more in like a category for an overlay?
That was kind of like my question. Like, if they came to it and they wanted to do a PUD, do we have an opportunity to look at it then and say, this actually should go into the overlay, or vice versa, you can do either one?
So if they want to do the PUD and they apply for a PUD, then it comes in as a PUD. We can try to talk to them and say, we think you might go this other route, but that's up to them.
Whether someone applies as a PUD or overlay or rezoning or whatever, if it's a data center, it seems like there are going to be a lot of questions we want to have answers to. And whether those questions are answered in a letter of intent or an application form or some other document, could we make a template and attach it as an appendix to the zoning ordinance and say, if you want a data center, you have to answer these 100 questions along with your submission?
Well, all those questions get kind of asked in the PUD process. It goes to tech review. There's all these steps, right? For let's see your plan, your detailed drawings, and through the PUD process, those questions are going to come out, be asked, and because remember, it's all subject to approval of the PUD. Did you want to say something, Kayla? Sorry.
Separate out to, if something goes through being rezoned to IG and being in a data center overlay, that's going to be one process. The PUD is a little different than that. So PUD for anything has its own separate process. So I don't know if I want to get into that so much right now.
Rhonda, could I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I'm just going to give a quick reference that some people will roll their eyes, but when the chicken coops started coming to us originally, We didn't know what questions to ask. We didn't know what standards there were. We had to go through a couple of them, and then we had to develop a process review, which to this day, we keep in our binders. So is there an opportunity for us to keep a similar administrative procedure as relates to data centers if they were to come into another pathway? Mostly because, I mean, these are not answers to questions. These are questions. So is the generator going to be low emitting? Is it going to be standard, or is it only going to apply with state air requirements, right? Those types of responses aren't given here. But it's okay because maybe you give and take on some of these when you're doing a PUD. So is there an opportunity for us to take this under advisement in a more administrative or something with staff? Like we do the chicken coops. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it would also be good for the company to have, because remember, they're trying to save money as well. They want to get cut to the chase as well. So anything you can give of kind of like, well, we probably would consider, our general rule is that we like you to have a closed loop system, anything you can provide that's kind of guideline related will also help them, so they can decide we can live with that, or we need to negotiate on that, or that won't work at all.
I would assume that by the time any type of data center that approached Hancock County government the commissioners would have their own list of guardrails help protect.
Yeah, and the guardrails, what we're trying to do is perhaps get at least some of those big ones in the overlay language in the ordinance. So that's what this committee is kind of charged, like what would those guardrails be? And the ones we know that we want, let's put them in writing. That way it's very clear to the company what the guardrails are.
I do suggest, though, so we're not back here in 2 years doing this again, that we keep some things as flexible as we can, because as everyone said, technology is really moving. The way these things are coming together and what their needs are with utilities and such and land usage, that we just, as we can, ask the question, but in more broad tense than trying to get real detailed.
Yeah.
I just assumed we were helping create guide rails for the overlay, for the commissioners to help them move forward. I mean, I may be confused.
That was what
I thought that's what we were doing here.
Yeah, because what if they answer a question that we don't like, or we don't agree with, or whatever, It doesn't matter. They answered the question, so it doesn't matter.
It should. I mean,
I know it should, but does it? Really?
I think then
They're
it
just
becomes,
questions.
I think that's part of the decision
Without a
process,
rule,
right? Like,
without
if
it
you-
being a rule,
If you get
these
a
are just
letter of
questions.
intent that has all of the questions answered, or that presents a development plan that says, here's the data center we want to build. We're going to have X number of diesel generating backup plants, and we're going to have X number of buildings, and we're using the following chipsets, and we're going to need this amount of electricity, and we're using a closed loop system, et cetera, and we're going to have berms, and we're going to have sound reductions, and we promise we'll have daylight hours, and so on and so forth. They can supply all that information, but I still think as a constituent in Hancock County, we would want to have an opportunity to say, they've answered all the questions, they've provided all the details, but we're not happy with that type of a system, that type of a thing here in our county. And then that's the part that I look at and think, I would hope that the commissioners or the people in charge who make the decisions could have an opportunity to listen and also understand. And then there's some that are going to be like, okay, well, this has got a concern, but we're going to allow it. Then I would like to see a plan for making sure that they toe the line and that they do the things they've said they were going to do. And if they don't, that there would be an appropriate consequence to fix it or stop it or mitigate it. That would be my desire.
Mine as well.
So haven't we touched on that with the overlay, there would be public meetings for these? Would those be public comment, or would they just be open to the public?
The public hearing.
Okay. So then,
in front of the Plan Commission.
so then the public would have the opportunity to go ahead and voice their opinions either way. So we can cover that one. And then part of our job here is to assist in talking about those clawbacks, talking about the things that we want to see as the Citizens Committee for the guardrails of we want these benefits, we want them to use these systems, we want them to use that for the Plan Commission and for the commissioners to then update the overlay how they see fit with those duly noted. So I think that covers a lot of our concerns by the fact that we're going to have the public hearings. They're taking our work here under advisement. It's not like we're just sitting here talking into the wind. So I think that that takes care of a lot of things.
Well, and that's why this task force was formed.
Right.
Because
You might,
we want to have the community engagement. So it's here that a lot of good people sit on this task force. So I know I can't speak for Bill and Gary, but I'm pretty confident that, you know, they're going to take everything this task force brings forward very seriously. And even though, like Clark and I are not voting members of this, you know, here to learn too. So don't think that it will fall on deaf ears. It will not. That's why we did this to start with.
so one approach you could do, maybe, I'll throw this out there, is take the criteria, A, B, C, D, E, F, go through each one of those, and then for the committee to kind of chime in is what do you think the commissioner should look at when it says will promote the public health, safety, comfort, morals, convenience, and general welfare of the citizens of the county. And then, you know, maybe throw out some of those ideas of what you think that would consist of and what they should consider under that topic, and then kind of go through each one. And along with these questions, I think you could probably pull out and use some of this also to answer those questions and what this committee wants the commissioners to consider under each one of those criteria.
That's a great process right there.
Well, I think that's what this is. So when we started this committee, the idea was to read, have speakers, learn, and then generate some, I thought, development guidelines, you can call them guardrails, to assist with the items A through F, to generate those guardrails, to enhance that overlay. That was the idea. So our next meeting, August 18th, was the next kind of phase. Like I said, we've been making this up as we've been going along, but on the 18th, we were going to take public comment, which was going to add to this body of knowledge to help with the task of enhancing A through F. I received a phone call last week that we needed to accelerate. So that's where we ended up with this document here is, you know, I just thought the only way to really, I kept asking myself, what's the deliverable? You know, what do we deliver from this committee to the Plan Commission? What can the Plan Commission deliver to the commissioners? There's apparently a need for some of this information to find its way to the commissioners quickly. And so that's what the scribe committee did here, was to try to create those list of questions. These are the things, I think, that we've learned that we think are the questions that the Plan Commission and the Board of Commissioners need to ask of a developer in their submittal.
What is the urgency? Why do they need it quicker than what we're doing?
I don't know the answer to that. I think it's just because these, you know, if we are looking to have something by October, you know, what if a project showed up next week? You know, they want to have something. I don't know if, and that's why I wasn't sure that it's the final deliverable or if it's just some guidelines, some information, some knowledge passed along, kind of passed through the process to the various people involved in those decisions.
I did at one point, and I see it's mentioned here in the summary of this, where I had compiled a document, my attempt to give you all of the information that you would want to consider as part of the overlay, called the Suggested Data Center Overlay Components. And in doing that, I did all the things I talked about. I outlined the various possibilities and things that I thought you would need to know in order to make a decision. And I also put in some clause into it, if you will, of things that, you know, they needed to say they would do, and if they didn't do them, then the consequence would be X, like a fine, and even going into enjoyment. Because, you know, you could get into a situation where the developer of this facility is not complying with the things they agreed to do, that I think we should have the staff available to make sure to be able to inspect and know that they haven't done that. And then we should also have the right to say, cease and desist. And, or, I even went so far as to say, plan decommissioning and what kinds of things. Because if a data center operator walked away from a building and left you with all that stuff, just like with solar farms, it's a huge expense to try to get rid of all and recycle, or, just be thinking about that. That could be down the line, but you better be thinking about it now because it's going to happen.
A procedural note from the scribe committee, we created the summary first, and then we created the questions based upon all the information we gathered, and then we did red lines back and forth several times. So it's likely that edits welcome, that's why it's presented, but if you find any gaps, that's kind of what we're doing tonight. Is there anything you want to supplement in? Were we careful, though, to take a real moderate view of the questions? We didn't answer them.
I didn't have a chance to look.
But as a scribe committee, we weren't answering. It was just collecting all the questions that are out there.
The other thing, too, is we have to be really conscious of the terms we use. The developer may be involved, or the contractor may be involved, but the end user may be who we're really after. So when we're doing all this, I just want to make sure that we keep some of these things loose so that we're not putting ourselves, because I'll tell you, some of these guys are pretty sophisticated and hire good attorneys, and they're going to cut through if we make it, a mistake and call something a development or during construction, or, we're really looking at the long-term use of this data center and how it's affecting our community. So we need to kind of maybe get above the terminology, because it may not be a developer. Meta does not use a developer. If they come here, anything we say developer wouldn't really apply to them. Google uses them. Amazon is using some, but they're doing some direct deals too right now.
I use the term developer in a kind of a loose fashion.
I'm just saying, their attorneys may not. They may tack you to the wall with it. So I just want to make sure that we are keeping that out of this. And you guys know, we just need to keep it open so that we can get the information we want to make the best decisions.
I know the county council has a form that when a company wants to come into Hancock County and seek a tax abatement, whether on property tax, real property or personal property, they have a form to fill out, which they say what their business is about, how many people are they going to hire, what are their revenues going to be. So there's some precedent for having this type of questionnaire or application form. And perhaps one of the things our committee or the scribes could do would be to help create that type of a form that would be specifically just for want to come in and build a data center.
The comment about the definitions was also a big concern, because if we start defining things and saying specific things, using specific words, then what's the shelf life of those words? They can change the next day, or a clever developer would change it themselves and say, that's not what we have,
But Lacey, doesn't most legal documents or things like this have a definition that we can say what we intend this word to mean? Like a terms portion. Is that something we would do here, or is that getting too detailed?
It can and should.
Yeah, our code has a definition section.
So you have a terms, like what the terms mean. So if there's anything that comes out of here, we can go back and make sure.
Define it.
Yeah, okay. And maybe that's what we do to keep away from those issues.
The only thing I think we didn't include is the end user, like you mentioned, is it a speculative development or not directly? I think we indirectly referred, that was something that came up as a theme, but maybe that's.
Would that term be utilized though with what he's saying as it relates to real property? Or, yeah, because most of the real property in the building would be used by the operator inside the building, right? So would it already be defined in the, for tax abatement? Or real property? It has to be defined.
The definitions, you mean?
Yeah.
Definitions can be tricky. It kind of depends on, tax abatement is state statutory, and there's a form that the state of Indiana provides. So those definitions apply to that. Your code, your local code can be Same word, but different definition.
We might have done the worst job on the economic development and taxation section. We talked about that actually, and we think it's appropriate to maybe pick up some themes, but that's something more economic development or we've struggled with that, like licensing. So other entities, we think we can just refer to them. We thought that maybe that wouldn't even be an exhibit, so we put it very last. Although it was referenced pretty extensively in our review of the scribe items, we just think that we might not be the best equipped with the language to talk about economic incentives.
I think that's something that council would probably look at if and when we receive a letter of intent. So, this will, I think, will be a whole different ballgame than just your regular economic development agreement or your tax abatement or, anything that we're used to working with now currently. It could be a whole different ballgame.
So I guess maybe first question, would the committee advise that a data center should not be a PUD, or should not? That's, I guess, one threshold question.
Super situational based on the project that comes, and I know we keep circling back to that, but
To allow both?
Yeah, like Clark was saying, you close one path, you open up another, and anything can happen that nobody foresees it. It happens. So I think allowing both paths to be open.
So first recommendation might be that both pathways should be open for a data center?
But I think the path of least resistance would be the overlay, right? Because the PUD, they're recreating their.
Probably situational, like you just said,
I think a PUD gives a project the ability to start anywhere in the county, in any zoning.
But, yeah, regardless of IG. Where the overlay right now is just for IG.
So you'd have that extra step of rezoning to IG before you even start.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I would vote not to have a PUD if that's the case.
Well, my concern with the PUD is any requirements that we put in overlay, they don't have to shift with the PUD.
They're going for IG zoning, they have to, right? Isn't that what we're doing? So if the PUD submitted and wanted to rezone IG, that falls within the overlay, right?
No.
They don't have to.
PUD is the IG. Like either the zone,
It's
the
not
zone is PUD, or you have a zone IG. There's one or the other. The zone,
So PUDs are own zoning. They're not categorized as anything.
they're their own zoning district. And when you want to look up the rules for a PUD for that zoning district, you go to their own plan that was approved.
Okay.
And that would eliminate, what we talked about before was, there were 4 different zones where a data center could conceivably come in if they wanted to. We got, with the ordinance change, 2026 6E, we went with the overlay, which would then be only IG. So do I understand correctly then, if you also allowed a data center to use a PUD, we would lose the guardrails?
No, because a PUD is all negotiable. So as you're negotiating that PUD, you can come up with whatever's in the overlay and that much more. You can add things. It's all negotiated.
That would be an ordinance, that'd be to say that a data center by definition can't be filed as a PUD, that would have to be
Change
in our ordinance. Yeah.
Rhonda, if we said that a PUD application would be required to at least consider these guidelines, is that a change as well? Is that an ordinance change, or is that just a procedural change at the staff level?
I think that would happen anyway, that we would probably pull from, you got a blank sheet of paper. What do we want out of this project? And so we want to see a plan, and we're going to probably borrow some things from the overlay when that makes sense for this petitioner. So you can kind of make it up as you go.
So it's nice to have this committee and the minutes associated with it. recall back on when we have questions about where we're going to put a sidewalk, because we had committee minutes that we were able to reference. So very similar, this type of work will allow for that guidance to be referenced in a PUD. Great.
Reference would help for the negotiation process for that PUD. So if the developer's looking like, well, what questions do they have? They can cite this and say, okay, they're probably prepared to ask these questions. Let's include that. If the commission comes up with more questions, all the better. But that's just a baseline of what to expect for receive out of that PUD.
At what point in a PUD does the public get a hearing? Is it after it's all negotiated, then we have a public hearing?
That's a rezone, so it has to be rezoned. There's a public hearing with a rezone.
But that's, the PUD is a rezone, right? But is that, so do they come forward and make negotiations and then ask for it to be submitted for a public hearing? Or the developer would come forward with a PUD, have a public hearing, and then have negotiations?
Kayla, can you walk us through the PUD process? Able to do that without looking at your notes? I will have to pull my notes about to get all of that.
The main reason I ask is because I've been through this process and met with developers, and you get to a point where there's not a back and forth with the developer. It's this is what we're doing, and then it goes to a vote. So this piece right here is nice because we get to have a say in this and help outline some guardrails for the public. Where if the public just has a say after the fact, it loses its transparency. That's the point I'm trying to get at. So the public likes to feel like they're part of the negotiation instead of just coming to the meetings and hearing the negotiations. They want to feel like they're more part of it because it is so impactful. And it is in some people's backyard. So that's the point that I'm trying to get out of. What point does the public get to be part of the negotiation, if they would at all?
Okay, I pulled it up. It's actually in a picture in our code. Step 1, application, preliminary plan, and plat is filed by the petitioner. Next is tech review committee. Next is public meeting notification. Next is the public hearing by the Plan Commission. Then there's different pathways. Plan Commission could make a decision, could be continued, could give a favorable, unfavorable, or no recommendation. At that point, petitioner could withdraw. Next step is public hearing by the legislative body. Could deny it or certified and adopted, could certify and adopt. Then submitted to the planning director submitted approved plan to the planning director. Then the application with final detailed site and development plan is provided by the provider. Then that goes through tech review, administrative staff review. It could be denied, modified, or approved, and then it's recorded and approved as a final detailed plan. So it never gets to the end of the whole process without a final detailed plan.
And did I hear the milestones right? Minimum public hearings, planning commission, maybe tech, and commissioners or legislative body, minimum 3? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there was a public hearing by the Plan Commission, public hearing by the legislative body. In there was at least 2 tech review committees, which could be continued. Like a project this big could have to go to tech more than once to get those things worked out. And so at least 2 public hearings.
An example of a living PUD is the Hancock Gateway on Mount Comfort Road south of I-70. That was approved as a PUD. And it's a mixed-use development, so that whole area there, however many acres that is its own zone. And so any time that they want to do something different than what is in the development plan, they come to the Planning Commission with a PUD amendment. So it happens, it's it's a lot of work for the staff. That's why the staff doesn't like them. It's just, it's burdensome, you know, so it's kind of tough.
But they're very transparent.
But they are, and it's very, it does give you the opportunity that everything that happens inside of that becomes a public hearing, essentially. You know, it's something as simple as, well, we thought that this building was going to be 3 stories, but now it's going to be 2 stories. You know, it's PUD amendment. You know, it's like everything that they do comes to the commissioners. So that makes it, when you talk about guardrails, I mean, not necessarily guardrails, but it's a very transparent process. So
I think also we need to not forget the first step in all of this is someone willing to sell their ground, which is firmly between the current landowner and whoever they're selling to. And I mean, the first best thing is not selling if you don't want it in your neighborhood. And so knowing your neighbors, supporting your neighbors. I mean, like our farm, we're never selling, no matter what. Now, once we're dead and gone, and hopefully it's on the 10th generation, I can't speak for them, but you know, this is a process, and you know, everything we're talking about is good stuff, but let's not lose fact of, first, that ground has to be sold. And so, you know, there's a lot of work that could be done in advance of all of this. And so just not losing sight of neighbors supporting neighbors and knowing your neighbor, of having those conversations and supporting each other.
So would there be a way to write in to specifically not allow for eminent domain to be taken for these specific projects of mine? I mean, yes, you say with the sales and stuff, but, you know, as people start to worry, the city's going to just eminent domain your property.
In Indiana, you can't do that. It's against the law.
Perfect. I just want to
There
make
was
sure.
there's a U.S. case on eminent domain that allows it, but Indiana has
Okay.
reacted and said that for private use, you cannot use eminent domain, even if it's for a greater public purpose.
Thank you, because I didn't know that, so good to know. Thank you.
So for this committee to make recommendations on guardrails, where we were starting to head was really deep into the weeds. So as you start to talk about things, we started getting to the point where we were talking about development guidelines. So we're going to talk about what is the building going to look like? What are the setbacks? All those things. So the step back here is something kind of like this, which, you know, if you look in here, it's like, well, is noise an issue? Noise is an issue. Okay, what does the planning commission need to look at for noise? Well, they need to look at the landscape ordinance. They need to look at setbacks. They need to look at building materials, you know, so it's all those things in zoning. So I don't know how you build, I guess I don't know how you define a guardrail in those topics without actually getting into the very details of a zoning ordinance and a development guideline, as opposed to just saying, these are the topics, these are the things for the plan commission and the board of commissioners to pay attention to, and the TIC committee.
Or just request the info.
Right.
What's your plan?
Right.
Here are a list of 57 questions. We want to know exactly what you're doing. I think that's, I don't know. I don't know. Just think that that's the simplest way to do it.
Well, and that's kind of where we're started here. And maybe this document's just not done. Maybe it needs more refinement, you know, because how's the electricity used from the grid? What's the cost? You know, is it generated on site? Is it wind, solar? You know, all of those questions are starting to find form in this document here. And so that was the purpose of this. And maybe it's not ready. Maybe our outcome here this evening is just to share this information with the Plan Commission and the Board of Commissioners, but we still need to refine it after our August 18th meeting where we take in more public comment.
I think if nothing else, it's a really strong skeleton to build off of. It's definitely going to need some refinement, as would any version 1 of something. But I think having read through these and having talked through them amongst ourselves, it's a really good scaffolding to kind of flesh out and turn into what we want to see as like our final recommendation.
I agree 100%. I think the scribes did a really good job. I think we've pinpointed a lot of things. May not capture all of it. There may be some tweak of something that we haven't seen or heard of yet. We need to have the ability to be able to ask for more if we hear something that we need more info, or the commissioners do, right?
Right.
But if I can maybe make a comment on, so when drafting this, we drafted it according to what all the other feedback that we got. So all the presentations, all the reviews. We know that some of this cannot be done because we have existing ordinances that might not allow it. We know that some of this cannot be done or should not be done because it's administrative burden to staff. We thought it was appropriate to show this as version 1, but it would be excellent to get a review from staff and from council. Things like, should a data center applications be posted to the planning commissioner's website, or planning commissions? We wouldn't want a separate administrative process for this. We would want to follow it as much as possible, because if we overburden staff on administrative items, it just doesn't, and things should go during the normal due process. We should just have it in the due process. So some of these things need to be stricken out, absolutely, but it's a capture of what everyone else is doing out there. So yes, it does need staff and legal review. Complement our county right now.
But at this juncture, what we're talking about now, since we're kind of under this time push a little bit, this is an overlay with these guardrails or questions or inquiries that we want back from some data center that comes using IG zoning, right? So wouldn't everything go through whatever IG zoning's staff requirements are anyway?
Yes, and the overlay is one more layer we were putting on top.
That's right.
It's the IG minimums, and then it's this on top.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is not to add anything additional. Let's just do this overlay to gather info and then go through IG as it relates to the execution through staff.
I think there's always clauses of notwithstanding that we've encountered, but it's all just bootstraps and suspenders to the base ordinance that we have now.
Okay.
And this probably just needs some refinement to see what's contradicting, what questions we can and cannot ask, but Mike put us on the right path.
So I've been going through it this entire time, just marking little things here and there.
So
I'm still going through it.
When the overlay was drafted, I think the intent was to allow data center developments in the IG district and require it to have an overlay. The overlay ordinance as it exists today doesn't really have any requirements, right? So that was what we were wanting to do. And that just was an overwhelming task. So, that's kind of where we were heading with this questions list. But ultimately, I would love it if we could come out of this process with a list of development guidelines and some planning tools. And I don't know, from what your conversations that you had, and I can ask Janine too, what would be a good outcome now? Would the sharing of this material be good at this point, or do you want us to?
It would be. I think the scribes have done a great job. Paul, you've done a great job with the questions. I know, the Board of Commissioners, we've been down this path. Back with the Surge project, we learned what not to do and what we need to ask for if this should ever present itself again. We are better prepared as a Board of Commissioners to hit it head on, and where our negotiating skills would be much more defined this time around. And we decided this a long time ago as a Board of Commissioners that we're in charge here. It's going to benefit our community no matter what we do, whether we're talking about a data center or a factory or anything else. So we learned a lot that first time around.
But we need to also remember that different types of uses in our community will provide us different kinds of paybacks, different types of things that will help. Some will be job creation of jobs that bring in a higher demographic. Some will be data centers that maybe we can get long-term sustainability for parks and schools and fire. You know what I mean? So I agree with you, Janine, but I think we need to understand that the paybacks from these different uses are different.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. And we know what we can ask for. And, we had other projects that have come in front of us. I wasn't on the commissioners then, I was on council, but other big projects that just weren't right for us. And there wasn't going to be enough benefit to the community to face that at the time. So, but now we know what, I don't want to say we completely know what we're doing, but we know what we did wrong, we know what we needed to change, and we're going to, the negotiations will be there. Guardrails will be there. If this presents itself at any time, I think we're more prepared.
quick thing to add about overlay districts. So we have zoning districts, which you all are very aware of. Overlay district, like a data center overlay, can exist over multiple zoning districts. So should we amend the ordinance so that different kinds of data centers are allowable in different zoning districts, there can still be a data center overlay district, like a cloud kind of setting over multiple zoning districts. So you could have a data center overlay that sits over currently just IG because of the way it's written in code, but it could also ultimately sit over IBP, IL, things like that. So it can be expanded in that way.
Probably think the key to that is to, just like you talked at the beginning about the different types and intensities of data centers for when they would be allowed in the industrial light or a little bit, not heavy use, then that would probably make sense when we get to that point.
The only thing to hinder that on is not making it too hard for people to build and do business here. We don't want to add another step if we don't need to.
But I think we need to be careful. I'm risk averse, okay? Long-term type person. We'll be selected against because so many of other Indiana counties have direct moratoriums. So many of other states have already established moratoriums. So that makes us more of a target. So I think it's important. And I get what you're saying, and I do agree that we should be selecting projects that will benefit.
I'm just saying if there's an office use and they've got a large component that's an IT room but falls under our data center.
Sure.
Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah, I worked for a company where we
here, but we're
had that.
competing with Hendricks County and they're one step less and these guys have a time frame. We may not get that development. So we just have to be mindful of adding too much when we really want something.
Mm-hmm. Right. I just think, I mean, the purpose of, I think the purpose of the overlay is to protect us against the data centers that are not, like, oh, you get a company with, I'm going to make up a fake example here, 1,500 employees, and they're an IT shop. It's a company that develops software for something, and they've got 1,500 employees, and their data IT space is 3 floors of their building. That's pretty good size, depending on the size of the building. That's a data center, but it's used for that company. It's not like a hyperscale data center or a cloud computing data center. I think, to me, those are two different things. And if you have to do something to the zone definitions so that you don't prohibit that, by all means do, because that would be a safe, in my opinion, a more safe use of IT space than a hyperscale data center.
Well, that's an interesting point about the, we don't want to preclude, we don't want a project that might not have otherwise ever met with any kind of restrictions now has restrictions in our county because it meets our definition, our new definition of a data center, and now it only is allowed in IG, and it's a project that maybe the commissioners would like to have in the county, so.
So could there's a chance, could we go over specifically, like section by section for the data center questions, just to go over? I assume some people may have been looking at it. I know I have very thoroughly specific sections of it that may not make sense or some stuff that we should amend out of it.
Before we go into the detail, maybe a procedural note. Do you want us to pick these up from minutes, or would you rather circulate a red line and we all red line it together?
Yeah.
Red line?
What do you guys think?
So the whole group would do that?
I don't know that we could do that by tomorrow
Don't have
evening.
Yeah, it'd be tough.
Okay.
There's just so much through here, going through
I saw all your notes, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah. Oh,
Who's taking notes?
right.
Scribe
And I wouldn't go through every single thing. It was just like, what do you guys think?
Okay.
Okay, quick through type of thing,
Okay.
but.
Yeah, so that's where I kind of started as our conversation started to accelerate, but,
Right.
so item number 1, I just thought maybe if there were, ultimately, maybe this evening, I think that our goal would probably be to draft something to send as an information share to the Plan Commission. They could then share it with the Board of Commissioners with any of their comments. You're trying to write a recommendation as we're talking, I know, but maybe that recommendation is, from this evening, is this committee would like to share this compiled summary and list of concerning topics. And so obviously the scribe committee has done a good job of putting this all together in a lot of detail. Is there anything that we need to strike from it to make it more concise? Or is there anything that you don't feel is accurate based on conversations that we have had so far? So we'll just start up here with item number 1. As you kind of glance through there, and is there anything in here that is not consistent with our discussions or needs to be added or deleted? We had a lot of discussion about PUD.
Yeah, and I got a text from my husband who's watching online. He said, and we live pretty close to the Gateway project that you mentioned. If they had a PUD and it looked a certain way and they came in and made a change, there was no public meeting. Is that the case? Like, if I were a person, I'm a development corporation, I'm going to have a planned unit development, I'm going to have 597 acres, and these are the components. And one of the components is a 3-story office building. But then later, I changed my mind. I've got new people coming in, and I want it to be 5 stories. Do I just send something in, and it shows up in the meeting minutes, and it's done?
No, it's an amendment to the PUD at that point. I can't think of anything that they would have done. Is there anything that they would have ever done that was not in a public meeting? Any changes that they would have ever made?
Minor amendments have gone just through my office, yes. So they'd be very, very small things.
Like a change in a road alignment or something like that?
Smoothie King wants a drive-through. Originally, the PUD didn't allow drive-throughs, things like that. I'm sorry if I shouldn't have mentioned the name of that company.
Oops. Oh, that's who's going. I saw the smoothie signs.
We'll edit that out.
So sorry.
That, or I think there was an apartment, some apartments that ended up a little bit smaller than the original PUD had hoped for them to be. And so stuff like that where it was like 20 square feet difference. That stuff is considered minor, and so we didn't bring it for a public hearing. But something like, hey, the original height was going to be 50 feet, and now that's going to be 70 feet. That's the kind of stuff that would require a major amendment. Or use differences that were not allowed in the original PUD. Like, mixed use office and residential things like that.
I think my concern with a data center type PUD thing is that you may not know why they're doing what they're doing. And with the new chipsets that are being created that are like, I don't even know for sure what NVIDIA is doing, but it's something big. So it could actually wind up, just because of computing differences, suddenly what you think is, that's not that big of a deal, might be a big deal, because suddenly it's consuming much more electricity than what you originally thought. Just a thought.
Every commissioner meeting and every community council meeting are public. So if you want to know what's going on, it's at those meetings.
Believe me, I watch and I look at the agendas, but I can't say that every single time I see something on the agenda, I think, oh gosh, I really need to be there. Or someone pointed out to me today is like a lot of the public meetings are advertised in the newspaper, and they're like, well, we're not subscribers. I'm like, oh. So I'm just saying, there's sometimes things might happen that aren't publicized in such a way that people have an opportunity to voice concern.
Want to get deep in the weeds, there was some good hearings at the State House last year on whether meeting notices should be in newspapers, online, wherever. Just side note of if you really want to get deep into public notices.
I've been going through the list of questions as well and marking off which ones are things that we can incorporate into an ordinance that would be in the zoning ordinance, and which ones would be more appropriate as part of the LOI, letter of intent process, and things that really the commissioners need to take into consideration in their portion of this, which obviously you are all interested in the whole thing. But for me as like planning staff, I'm just really looking at like, what's going to go in my zoning ordinance. So stuff like the electric grid stuff and a lot of that heck, the electric companies make their own decisions outside of my department, so.
Actually, we could probably do a subpart 1B4, should minor amendments by staff be handled by the Planning Commission? So minor amendments be handled by staff or the Planning Commission on PUD. So we can have a question that can address the procedural.
Which one was that, Lacey?
So we're talking PUDs and some or just deeper into PUDs on section 1, page 1, subsection B. There'd be a new subsection 4 about amendments, minor amendments. Major amendments will always go to the Planning Commission.
Well, I mean, years ago, I think, put into play that, what was it, secondary plats, I don't quite remember now, can be approved by the staff. And so, I mean, but are you comfortable with that, Kayla, on that, on your shoulders? Or would you prefer it come right to the Planning Commission?
The way it's written right now, minor amendments are in the PUD section of our code and are, staff approved. But once again, if there's any question on whether it's minor or major, just let it go to Plan Commission. So.
Section 1 go.
I don't know, the whole section B was, I don't know that you would ever necessarily consider PUD together with an overlay district, but I mean, I guess it's a valid question, but that was one item I wasn't sure about, but.
We could relocate subsection B to subsection 2, which would be, 2, subsection B, where we do talk about PUDs.
Yeah, that would probably make some sense. Yeah, because the whole section 1 about selecting the right planning tool, and maybe some of that just gets filtered into item 2, instead of being its own thing.
And it might be the next version of this has a highlighting key where, we already addressed it in our ordinance. We already addressed some of these.
That's a good idea, yeah.
So, yes, it's talked about, but we already have a provision for it.
Say for zoning 2, on section E for the fees and impacts assessments, I don't think it should be necessary, specifically tailored towards data centers, because that would be a business incentive not to come here. And I feel like with the right negotiations, the right people sitting in the chairs, we could really benefit from these. And if we're targeting specifically data centers, I feel like it should be an all or nothing thing for businesses coming in. I don't think it should be specifically selected.
I just thought that the amount of I think that might have come out of something I put together initially, but the amount of effort that it goes into evaluating a data center would be much higher potentially than it would be for like an apartment complex.
Well, we could always have more than apartment complexes coming too. There could be added stuff to more hospitals. It could be another community network building. Those come with a lot of planning as well.
We can hit all that in the community benefit agreement. I mean, we can pick up reimbursement fees in other areas here. I agree with you. If there's fees here, it needs to be fair for everybody.
Right.
That's how I feel about it.
And definitely any type of fee or impact fee would need to be under the last part.
Yeah.
Economic.
That's my only edit to section 2 personally. Everything else though.
So the equivalent of impact fees would not be available but in a PUD, and it wouldn't be called an impact fee. There'd be a traffic or other infrastructure impact. So we probably can't say impact fees technically because we haven't done the studies at this level to do it.
Right.
At the county, we would need to strike that probably.
That'd be my recommendation, strike.
And just as a note, we reset our fees just recently for the, and we did so by studying the amount of time that it takes to do some of these applications, and it is absolutely time-based. We incorporated as well costs for council for these because it's been more time for the larger projects. So the biggest head nods on that are probably coming from someone from who handles budgets for the county.
And it can only be done every 5 years, Is that correct? 5 years? Change?
So you were recommending striking 2E?
Yes.
That's your only job.
All or nothing, you know, if we're gonna do one data centers, then all businesses should be paying it, so it's not predatory specifically at data centers.
I can see how a data center that wants drill wells or something, would it be appropriate for the county to understand what's the hydrologic plan of the aquifer? Should we get someone to study that, and is that gonna cost $1,000 or $5,000 for us to go find some consultant to do that?
Good question. I addressed later inside us that aquifer drilling should be banned outright, no on-site drilling.
That's why, I
I
believe,
mean,
that's why I agree.
that's one option. But I can see other technical aspects of a data center, whether it's pollution, whether it's forecasting energy usage.
Right.
Whether it's forecasting disposal of those nuclear waste if we have action.
Some SMRs actually use nuclear waste to power. I hear where you're coming from, though. Valid questions, though.
Yeah, but the question, I don't think the Hancock County Planning Department has the technical expertise to evaluate these on its own, and I don't think we want to study that before it can even decide if it wants to recommend.
Well, couldn't that be a part of the CBA as well? Part of the agreement that you have with the developer to make them do an aquifer assessment or a forecast power use?
Yeah, I think a community benefit agreement is like the last stage of the process. After it's been approved, then you sign a community benefit agreement.
So you can put the CBA.
What would be their reasoning for ever signing a CBA if it's after it's been approved, though?
There are two pathways.
Approval would be conditioned upon signing the CBA.
So you would have already had to have figured out what the CBA would have been ostensibly.
Right.
Because if your approval is contingent on them signing the CBA, you wouldn't give them approval before you would figure out what you're getting, what you're giving. So it wouldn't make sense to have an approval floating around out there in the ether and then try to figure out what you're getting and what you're getting. Because what would be the incentive for them then to negotiate in good faith if there's already an approval out there and all they have to do is get what they want on paper?
No, they wouldn't. What I'm saying is that for the approval process, the county is going to incur substantial costs just to evaluate an application.
So we
And
wouldn't.
if we don't have that existing expertise on staff, and we have to go out and hire it, well, why should the county pay for it if it's the developer that wants us to evaluate?
So just as if it's a requirement, we would request that to be submitted in the application process, and staff would review that. We're not paying someone to study it. Though if we're lacking knowledge at the tech committee, we can ask for testimony to come in. But we're not hiring aquifer studies, though we might require the developer to submit in order for approval. So that payment's never coming, hasn't yet come, and we've seen some controversial noise, radio impact with radio, so we always ask the applicant to shoulder those costs. I don't know if always.
Don't we have some on-call agreements, though, Kayla, with outside engineers and technical support? So if we had to go that route, she's got a method to do that. And some of those firms that are already procured can reach out to firms that they do business with that specialize in some of these one-offs, right? So we have the ability to protect ourselves. They're already set up.
Okay, I got this idea from listening to the presentation by the Loudoun County supervisor or whatever he was. He said they charge $1,000 for.
All outside reviews are always required to be paid back for the applicant, right?
We don't have that.
Planning department rarely has to put that into place, but we do have a section in our zoning ordinance that does say use is not specifically referenced, will be subject to the hourly rate as determined by the planning director and building official. So we've got a catch-all in our fee schedule that, hey, this was not the usual. We need you to reimburse us for our plan review fees.
What is the impact assessment, though? What, define that. What are we talking about exactly? like, different studies
Could be
that we'd ask
environmental,
them?
could be water, could be.
Road
on the
impact
grid,
fee.
Could be civil matter, like how fast the roads would deteriorate when the construction starts. It could be a number of things. So it'd have to be very specific on what impact are we targeting.
Is height in there at all?
It could be if you're affecting with like the migratory channels for birds, if there's towers that birds could run into, then I could see that
I
happening.
just think one big economic factor we have in this county that we should be thankful for is having that regional airport. And I know they have they have height restrictions in their flight patterns right now, but I wouldn't hate to restrict them in their master plans that they do every 5 to 10 years on changing those runways to get bigger planes and bigger economic incentives there.
Right.
So I'm wondering if height should be added here at all, or if that's even, and I'm just throwing that out here as we're talking impacts.
I don't think height should be added solely for the fact that when people think of height, they usually think of windmills when they're worried about height, or massive skyscrapers, and I don't think Hancock County is going to build either.
Really, 7460 to crane height. So, and for the FAA. So, not really. I mean, I think Walmart, if I remember correctly, had to alter their layout to get away from any paths because they went up really high. They're higher than any warehouse in the industrial that I thought we had, if I remember correctly. It's been 7 years ago. So I'm just saying, I think height could be one that we could add.
I didn't even know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah. I just don't, we've got some good things going in this county. I would hate for us to not, I would love to give that airport the ability to grow and create more there.
Yeah.
And not hinder that. If anything would go close, I don't know.
So would our reference probably be our courthouse? Is that the tallest building in Hancock?
Let's leave it that way for right now, yeah.
So facility
is not
size
in
and
the
campus scale
airport zone,
addresses
so
height.
That doesn't make sense.
This document, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm kind of wondering if item 1, 2, 3, and 4 up to through B are kind of process, how we're accepting the application. I think maybe starting with 4C on, or you could leave 4C alone and just 5 on. That's your, one of you made the comment about the LOI. That's really LOI questions about what should be in the LOI. So I think that we could probably break this document into 2 headings. Application process and then LOI questions.
Edits on
And it
C
starts to
specifically.
become, like you were saying, the skeleton of the LOI guideline, I guess, or
Mike,
suggestions.
Would you just strike most of that, because our ordinance deals with a lot of those questions? Notice periods, meetings, public meetings. We don't want a special process for this.
No.
Okay, great.
Well, I'm not saying that we have a special process. I'm just saying that these items or these questions, that you talk about zoning process, the questions about what should the process be. Yeah, maybe we already have the process for 1, 2, and 3. But I mean, they're good questions for staff, I guess. Maybe they're guiding principles for the staff to say, well, maybe this is a PUD, or they could suggest to the developer that they might be better off with a PUD, or they might be best with a rezone to IG or something like that. And maybe the biggest question in items 1, 2, and 3 for the Planning Commission is this discussion about whether or not there should be more than just the IG. And why?
He's hardy.
All right, so I think we made it through item 1, and did we decide, I think, item 2E, we said we would strike that from our list here.
Wait, where's 2E?
Items 3, strategic compatibility. Again, these are probably things for for staff or the commissioners as they're evaluating.
I do have an issue with striking 2E with the impact assessment. If we're going to look at these as categories, then maybe we just look at like the highest impact data center. There's nothing, no industry that really compares to this. So how do we ask the Planning Commission and the commissioners to truly assess the impact that it's going to have infrastructure-wise if they don't have some type of study done beforehand? That's the issue. It's not like adding a Walmart supercenter or something. This is, we're going to have to go to some specific places in Indiana to look at the impacts that they've had. So that's kind of not asking for those up front, is just relying on these developers to tell you this is generically what we plan to do. That's my big concern with not having an impact assessment prior to that.
Well, the discussion was to apply it across all the developments, not just to have one specifically tailored for data centers.
But they're
So that way
different.
we're not
But they're
treating
different.
data center developers or companies differently than we are like a biotech company that wants to come in. They should have similar impact studies and fees related to all of them, or we should apply it to none because we don't want to be predatory against one specific industry.
And the Walmart supercenters do have a lot of impact in regards to logistical analysis, where you're dealing with truckloads every single day. They even have a tire center. That stuff's not light. It damages the roads. Now, I get where you're coming from. Obviously, data centers can have water consumption. That's an impact. They can have size, environmental impact is how large they could be. That's an impact. Very valid. And, Walmart supercenter, they are very large. They take a lot of logistics, trucking to and from. There's a lot of
These are not the same as a data center. The data center is totally different. That's why we have to have a whole committee about it. So comparing it to a Walmart supercenter or something is totally different. So the questions that she has, or the things that we want to know, or the fees that we want to charge so that we have the studies, because all this time that we've been here, I have not once heard a speaker come in and talk about the impacts that it has on our communities. We're just talking about what we want to get out of it, how we're going to benefit. So nobody's even addressing the impacts. So I feel like with the fees and them doing this stuff, impact assessment is legitimate for a data center.
Maybe the
totally
middle
different.
ground,
Then
the
does
middle.
that turn it into a moratorium too, with how long that impact study could take? And that's
If
what
you
people.
remember,
Well, I
we
mean,
wanted a moratorium in the
what-
very beginning. That's what we wanted. And that's the path of least resistance. It would have been easier, and we wouldn't be still talking about it. July
I don't think
27th.
that speaks for everyone, but I
What was it? What
I'm not
I
speaking
missed?
for everyone, I'm
Okay,
just
good.
saying in
So,
general.
maybe a middle ground, instead of having a generic reference to fees, would be to have an asterisk with each of these heavy uses, like on-site generation of power. And that says, we expect in the guidelines that is associated with some sort of a study. Because we're, those of us who serve in this and see these studies and these supplements coming out of the tech committee members, they're used to seeing these types of things. So it might be good for us just to asterisk where we expect a study. That way, we don't have a generic reference to an impact study. We're not having to pay for it, but we do expect some of these items to be proven. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a suggestion on studies. I think, like, kind of to Paul's point, I'm thinking back to how different things happen. It's some much simpler projects, of course, but a lot of times a developer will come to the Plan Commission and they'll say, we're going to have all these trailers or whatever. So a lot of times the Planning Commission will require them to come back with a traffic study that they've paid for. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here with these impact fees. It's like, what are some things that the Planning Commission should require the developer to do? I mean, should they test the aquifer? Should they, I don't know what, I'm just grasping at things, but like, what kind of studies should they have and present with their project? And the county doesn't pay for those. The Plan Commission requires it as part of their review. I don't know that we've ever had anything beyond just a traffic study, but that's the one that I can think of off the top of my head.
Well, I think our county engineer has a pretty good grasp on where our roads are today and I'm sure that he would have great input, or what it would take to maintain roads during the construction period thereafter. So that's not a concern for me at this point, because Gary knows what we've got, and that is something also that we would negotiate a letter of intent if we.
Data center that I'm working at solely responsible for around it that any truck could remove for any repairs. Just in that, it goes beyond that. They subsidize the neighbors around them, pay for they're needing, take care of the vehicles from dust control. There's a multitude of things that they're covering on their own wallet.
Yeah, and just like I mentioned earlier, we have learned a lot. We learned a lot during the last go-around with the data center project that was out by. So we will know how to negotiate all that, I'm confident.
Are we going to specify that they can only use roads that are at a certain level? Like, there's, I can't remember the intermediate use or whatever. And I'm thinking in terms of if you go down West 200 North right now and you two semis going down the road, it's not built for two semis to go down the road. So they're off the edge, and then you do see the dust.
Fully
Because
agree with
they're
you.
into the gravel part.
Fully agree with you. Or that if they are to want to use a specific road, that they upgrade it on their dime.
Thank you.
to
That's
bring
what-
it to you.
that's
Yes.
kind of what I would like
I'm with
to-
you on that, 100%. Yeah, because fixing a road that's not made for specific purpose is not fun to pay multiple times.
Well, even beyond that, it's, if electric's going to be ran, that's when eminent domain comes into play. And if you're going to run across a farmer's land and condemn part of that, you could be putting a farmer out of business because they wouldn't have enough acres to farm anymore.
But isn't that the utility company?
It's a utility company, but we should know that up front. People want to know if their livelihoods are going to be impacted. The commissioner should know that up front because there's no sum of money if one person is displaced because of that. Tell that one person, tell that one farmer. That's why these impact assessments are going to be very meaningful to the people that live near or that are impacted by water lines coming through that eminent domain. We've seen them reach 50 miles away. So that's why I'm adamant about the commissioners and the planning commission knowing a lot in advance because it's far-reaching. It's a regional impact too that is beyond this county.
Yeah, I think it sounds like, fees and impact assessment, that's a broad term. So I think we should probably just leave it in our list of questions here, just for all those points that, it could be, there's a lot more than just, just the application fee that I was originally kind of thinking of, and just some impact assessments. So yeah, it should be part of the question list or the letter of intent. We're getting close to our time here this evening, but let's quickly browse through. I think items 3 and 4 are all pretty straightforward.
I'd like to add in for 4 that NDAs are completely barred from the negotiation whatsoever. I don't think any of our officials should be signing non-disclosure agreements for these projects specifically.
I can tell you that I would not. So.
That should be
Yeah.
the election of the, we shouldn't, I don't think,
So
you can
again,
ask the
we're
question.
Yeah,
but-
so again, we're looking at questions that the
Yeah.
planning commission and the commissioners should be considering. These are just topics, of what, so they could make that decision. Public notification and hearings. I suppose it's a fair question, but we'll probably just defer to our current process. 'Cause that changes a lot of ordinance stuff that we'd have to look at. And then you get into operational transparency and public reporting. This is where I think we kind of start with, these are the items that need to go into the LOI. So that's where I think we're looking at maybe a formatting thing here. If that could be done before tomorrow, that we should maybe group some things here as to whether or not they should be landing what I would consider LOI guidance, I suppose.
Is that 5 moving forward or 4?
Definitely 5 moving forward, but yeah, maybe that's fine, because item C, we start talking about some of this public reporting of the different types of resources used. So it kind of falls under both. I mean, I think operational transparency and public reporting is a topic that should be considered by the commissioners, but the resource use is a huge topic, and it starts to fall under item number 6. So maybe we don't need the subsections, I through VI, I suppose, because we're starting to get into the detail in item 6.
As long as they're all addressed, so I think,
Yeah.
so it's not so strike, what ongoing information about the data center's operations will be publicly available, and then as long as all of those subsections are addressed somewhere in 5 and 6 and beyond, is that what we're saying, what are the plans for?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Just to clarify, I think that that item C came about as a result of saying, what's one thing for the letter of intent to include all this information, but then after the fact, they should be required to continue to report or make available so that you can make sure that they actually followed through with what they said they were going to do when they did complete their letter of intent.
Right.
Enforceable
Right.
agreement is a big thing, 'cause they can say everything, promise all these things, but if it can't be enforced, it's no.
Yes.
I was thinking that we had that then. Yeah, maybe if you could just reterm that as ongoing public reporting in C. I guess that's not further in here. I was thinking it was down in the CBA, but yeah.
Either we keep it and say, and what other plans for, or we just need to transport that section to a new. So.
I think either, just as long as we just maybe term it ongoing public reporting. Considerations for ongoing public reporting. Could just
Do you think the obligation to report things on an ongoing, something that should be in the zoning ordinance? Require them to do it?
Yeah, because it says how frequently should each type of information be reported. So that's a question that should be.
Just to the point of, not all this is going into the ordinance, right?
No.
Okay.
No, this, I don't.
Okay. Good, all right, we're good.
I can see some things being in an ordinance, some being in a letter of intent or application form, some being in a community benefit agreement. Giving up these issues and finding out which document is the most appropriate for them.
Yeah, I honestly don't really know what can and can't go into the ordinance and how it should go. And I'm sort of, again, feeling my way through this, but I'm kind of wondering if this document cleaned up, put in front of the Plan Commission and the commissioners, maybe this committee could get some feedback from that group as to, the Plan Commission deals with this more often, so maybe that group could say, have a discussion about what should go into the ordinance, like what level of development guidelines and what level of restriction should land in that overlay ordinance based on what they read in this document. So the recommendation of this group is that these are the questions, these are the things that we've heard and are thinking about, and then the Planning Commission needs to think about what's going into the ordinance based on this information. Energy infrastructure and grid impact, again, that kind of gets into all of that stuff in item C again. But yeah, that's sort of the big thing on the LOI is all the resource management. Item number 6, water resources and environmental quality. This is where some of those reports that we just discussed would probably be helpful. Some questions about that?
On the recommendation for that, Mike, would you like to see it at the primary or the sub level? It's just source and consumption for water would be, okay, great.
Yeah, some level. Yeah, I think these are all of the topics that we've heard and discussed: source, cooling, rates. Can't think of any more that were of concern. Item number 7 was citizen protection. Feels like it needs to be more robust, but it's, I think a lot of the citizen protection gets taken care of with also in public safety, decommissioning, and long-term protections, and the community benefit agreement. So I think the section stays, but it then also gets further enhanced by some of these questions that come up in those further topics. Protection. Location and land protection is a big question for, I think, the Planning Commission, and this gets into that discussion about whether or not other zones should be considered. But then this is really this item 8 is really the development guidelines section. And I think the Planning Commission needs to have a discussion as to whether or not they want to create development guidelines in the overlay ordinance.
That might not be a comprehensive list, so we might just want to check with staff to see if anything needs to be added to that. We don't have there's a lot of overlays, a lot of other.
Right. Public safety, emergency services, it's important, but that does get a lot of attention in Tech Committee. But the questions are definitely good ones for the commissioners to be asking that Tech Committee. And decommissioning and long-term protections will be a topic that needs a lot of study by the decision makers as well. Item number 11, then, like I said, I think that since we've been on 5 through here, this is all letter of intent. I think item number 11 was really talking about some guidance on the letter of intent. It can stay just like this, but I think that it's that letter of intent guidance. And then item number 12 as well becomes very specific to community benefit agreement. And then should it be a thing, and that's something that the commissioners will have to decide, is if they want to actually do a formal community benefit agreement like those communities that we talked to or heard from have done. Yeah. And then likewise, the economic incentives and fiscal safeguards would be.
So do we need to cure out some of the duplicates? Because this is duplicative to what we're talking about in the technical definitions, but we're talking about it in the application. If that whole section becomes the LOI, which is basically the application, which should we rehome some of those sub-bullets to where they belong? Okay.
Which are the sub-bullets you're referring to, basically?
Page 8, number 11. So we talk about water consumption and discharge, water cooling elsewhere. I think the question is, are we talking about if we relabeled that to be in the LOI, which is essentially the application?
Yeah.
Then we're talking about it twice.
Where's the second place where it's discussed?
So if we're to water cooling, for example, we cover under the we cover elsewhere.
Section 6.
Section 6 on page 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
B1.
So
We'll just get rid of the duplicates.
Oh, okay.
I don't think we talk about things like saving tree area under environmental, so if we rehome that, we just need to go through those individually.
Okay, community benefit agreement. I felt like this was a good summary of what we heard from the folks in Iowa. that'll get kind of beyond the purview of the planning commission and be more a commissioners and county council piece, as will item number 13 is more a board of commissioners and county council.
Would it be possible to gather that as an exhibit instead of a direct document? It's a little uncomfortable for us to get into that given our expertise here. And then it's just an exhibit of items that need to be considered with the right group. We're an appointment of the planning commission here, talking about land and technical items. We don't negotiate CBAs or economic.
Yeah, I mean, you could keep it as I guess you could take items 12 and 13 and say, for other bodies.
Yes, Exhibit A. Great. Because that is by no means comprehensive of what we should be including. But that's okay, because that's not what we're looking for.
So all of this formatting, Ms. Lacy, you were taking some good notes. Are we going to be able to
Paul did
update
too.
this?
Paul, I saw you taking notes. We'll collaborate. I guess the scribes can get together tomorrow to represent.
So for this to land with the plan commission are you guys okay with it being distributed? And
I don't see a problem distributing it as long as you say process.
Working document.
Right.
It's a living
Okay,
document.
present it to the planning commission as a working document. Yes, okay.
We can clearly label it B2.
Right.
6:30 PM. Okay, do we have any concerns about our direction here? As I think we're going to update this, distribute it to the group. The planning commission will see it tomorrow night as a work in process, and the planning commission can decide if they want to share it then with the commissioners with any kind of but it probably was going to come back and get further refined after our meeting on the 18th. And then hopefully we're meeting the expectation of the commissioners and the council and the planning commission with this. Any additional thoughts? The next meeting on the 18th, that's going to hit the website. There's this QR code so people can sign up to speak. And so what I think we're trying to do is see if we're going to be overwhelmed or underwhelmed.
I'll just give a quick update about that. So today in this meeting, we had the QR code, so if anyone that came in could just scan this and they can sign up. On the website, in the data center section, there is a section under the meeting for August 18th where they can sign up. We'll just add some general information, and that will come to my email inbox. And I'll just create an Excel sheet to have a list, ongoing list, and then it closes August 10th, just to give us some time. If there's a lot of people, gives us some time to kind of plan for that. So yeah, that's a little update of that.
Will you decide after everyone has signed up how many minutes can be allocated to people?
And that's why we have it for August 10th, because that gives us about a week to plan for if we need to change location or how much time we're gonna give the people who want to speak.
Is that posted outside your office as well? And
Got one at the, in the entrance of our office, when you come in, the counter, and then I will have one posted up here as well with the public notices. So,
All right. Any further thoughts? Any concerns? Everybody feels decent? Not great, but decent? Okay. I have a motion to adjourn. 8 minutes over.
Adjourn.
Second.
Okay, moving second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Thank you.